I'm Bob Buckhorn, and welcome back to the Mayor's Hour. This is our second show, Jack, and I don't know how we're going to top that first show we did out at MacDill Air Force Base, but that was a special moment, I know, for that colonel who was retiring, and certainly for me to be out there with those war fighters, and it was an honor. And I know how you feel about them as well, Jack. And
such a big part of the community, but we're shifting this month to another big part of the community.
We are indeed. We're up here at USF. This is a huge economic engine for our community, and we have some very special guests today that we're going to be talking about some really exciting things that are happening in our community. And you know, Jack, I know you talk a lot about this on the radio about the new kinds of jobs that we need to create and transitioning from an old economy to a new economy. Well, this is exactly what we've been talking about, and it's exciting to be here.
Yeah, the opportunity to have clusters here, and of course, USF moving downtown and Moffitt Center moving downtown, and all these things that are going on, it's just tremendous because, as you say, these are the kind of jobs you want to bring to the Tampa Bay area. And of course, you've been out doing a whole lot of job hunting.
Yeah, easy. Don't start any rumors. One trip to Washington cures you of that, I can promise you, Jack.
You've been to Washington. You've become the very peripatetic mayor, I like to say, but out trying to bring jobs to the Tampa Bay area, among other things, and of course, bring a little help for the Republican convention. But we'll have to talk about that later and talk about what all you've discovered and what all you've been able to get to do.
Well, it's been a great 100 days. You know, I'm excited to be there. I love going to work every day, and I think there's this pent-up optimism out there, Jack, that I can feel and that I feed off. And so those 18-hour days just go by in a blur because everyone is excited about what the future looks like.
Well, your first 100 have been great, and here we are cranked up running into the second 100 now.
We are indeed.
We'll do them in 100-day increments.
Oh, please, come on.
300.
Well, we are here today in one of the procedure rooms at the Frank and Carol Morsani Center for Advanced Healthcare on the USF campus, and we will be talking about the CAMELS project, as it is affectionately referred to, the Center for Applied Medical Learning and Simulation. This is one of the most exciting things that's happened to this community in a long time, and we are very excited to have the mastermind behind all of this. He is the Dean of USF Health, Dr. Stephen Classico. He is what we refer to as a first-round draft pick, and we are lucky to have him in this community. We're excited, and we're going to be back with Dr. Classico in just a minute, so stay with us. Welcome back to the Mayor's Hour. We have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Stephen Classico, who is the Dean of USF Health and the architect behind a very exciting project that we're going to talk about today.
I like the way you put a first-round pick.
He is indeed a first-round draft pick.
Well, as a 5'7" guy, I'll take that. I like to be a first-round pick
pretty
every
good.
day.
Dr. Classico, that's kind of a mouthful. The USF Center for Advanced Medical Learning and Simulation, also known, and I like the acronym, CAMELS. Give us the Reader's Digest version of what CAMELS is all about.
Well, I'll just tell you one funny story. We were actually asked to look at potentially building one of these in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, and I went to Sheikh Ahmed, and I got all excited. I said, I want to talk to you about camels. And he said, well, boy, that's something we don't usually get. The Center for Advanced Medical Learning and Simulation really is exciting. We look 10 years from now and say, what are some of the things that are obvious about healthcare? And one of them is that we need to make sure we can know if a doctor is competent and if he or she is a good team player. So when you go on a plane tonight and you see that pilot, you know he's competent, right? And you know that because every 6 months he or she is getting his technical competence assessed. The last time I got my technical competence assessed, and I hope none of my patients are listening, but it was 1984. Because once you graduate from your residency, that never happens. So we now have created a model, working with aviation and others, around the fact that everyone can start to learn that they're within a mean and a standard deviation of competence. But here's where it gets really cool. As new developments happen, robotics and new procedures, how do you learn that? Most people just sort of learn it, you know, well, I'll watch somebody and then I'll do one. We now can take that new procedure with the drug or device development company and train 20,000, 30,000 docs right here in Tampa. And that's what we're doing with the company, the robotic company, Intuitive. We are the Southeast representative. So they'll all have to come into Tampa to learn how to use the new robots.
Oh, and that's a great economic engine. I mean, that's terrific.
Well, what's even more exciting, Jack, and I know for you as well, but for me as the mayor of Tampa, is where it's going to be located. This is a bold move for USF to put a signature project and a signature footprint in, say it real loud,
What?
Downtown
Tampa. And you know, smartest thing we ever did. So think about making yourself healthier and better in simulation, and then think about sports and maybe human performance. So we're talking to them. So we've had restaurants and hotels and the convention center all get excited about how we can work together. There are big conventions, simulation conventions that are now talking to us. So we think it's going to be fantastic. And here's another thing, new jobs. We've looked at what are some of the new healthcare jobs. Healthcare coaches. We got a federal grant to create electronic healthcare ambassadors. Well, what if somebody wants to take one of those courses that works downtown, or you know, we can now do that. We're going to have evening classes so people can do healthcare jobs in emerging health professions. So this is more than just a simulation. This is our first foray in downtown Tampa. We're going to have a big sign, USF Health in downtown Tampa, and we certainly appreciate you being just such a great ambassador, and Mayor Iorio before you, and the City Council really understood really the potential for this thing.
Well, we've got to give former Mayor Iorio a lot of credit, Jack, because she was the one that represented the city and got that deal done and sold USF the land. And so she started that process, and our job collectively is to get it done.
Absolutely.
But for the folks that may not know what simulation is or robotics, take a step back, Doctor, and tell us exactly what this means.
Okay. The advances happening in medical care are amazing. I can be in that room and operate on somebody in a different room. And the reason that's important is you can get into areas that we never could have before. But it's a different set of skills. And the way it's traditionally been in medicine, and again, this is a little scary, if you're a resident, let's say, you're a training doctor, see one, do one, teach one. You watched one, you then did one, and then you taught one. Well, that's great unless you're the one on the other side of the table, right? So, but that's just how it was because we had nothing else. Now we have these amazing simulators, and the best way to look at it is Disney. You know when you go on that Back to the Future ride or the Harry Potter ride, you feel like you're in the thing?
Yes.
Well, that's what this is like. So now what we can do, we call them procedure rehearsal studios. So now literally we can have our residents or our attendings do the procedure before it happens.
Yeah, I've been in a Delta Airlines simulator. I think it was a
777?
one of those.
Yeah.
Big ones up there in Atlanta, and it's incredible because you fly, and if you want to fly down the Verrazano Bridge, you can. I crashed into the Washington Monument, did a lot of things like that, but I mean, it's like you're actually flying the plane, and these guys learn the new planes that way. They actually seemingly fly them.
Exactly. I still operate, and I had a procedure, and I was able to look at what was on that MRI, feed it into the simulator, and really practice it. And it makes so much sense, but we're really one of the first places in the country that's actually doing it.
So you could conceivably take Jack's MRI and go in the night before he had surgery and do a simulated surgery on his real issues so that the next day when you went in there, you would know exactly what mistakes not to make.
Now that's the next wave, and that's what we're working with companies. So some of this is what exists today. 10 years ago, simulation was a bunch of rubber bands and, practice. When I was a resident, it was rubber bands and tubes and practicing. Now, they're real simulators. The next thing that's happening, and one of the companies we're working with out of Israel, is to literally take that MRI, exactly what you said, and be able to practice it the next day. So we got, actually, this is another great thing for Tampa. We got what's called a BIRD grant, by National Industrial R&D Grant. Between Israel and the United States, they give $1 million grants for companies to work together. We're the first academic institution to get it since Cleveland Clinic 6 years ago. So literally what that will do is bring Symbionics, the company from Israel, who's one of the leaders in simulation, down to Tampa.
Wow, and that is amazing, though. We were talking to somebody on the radio the other day about advances in medicine looking down the road, how much IT is going to play a role. I mean, someday, once upon a time, the doctors made house calls. Now you go to the doctor. It'll be back to house calls, but it'll be making the house call from the office to the home and show a picture of whatever it is and that kind of thing. Oh, yeah, I see that. You need to do thus and so or something. But this is really a step beyond that, I think.
Right, and Jack, the other piece of it is teamwork. one of the things that we haven't been great at as physicians is the teamwork with nurses, unlike the military, unlike some other things. Partly because doctors train separately and nurses train separately. What we'll do at our simulation center is have doctors and nurses test different things. Something goes wrong in the OR. How do they handle it? And if they don't handle it perfectly, we can actually train them. That's not necessarily technical. That's just, what do you do when you're frustrated? What do you do if something's going wrong? And we're actually working with the military, and it's great being here with MacDill. We think we'll be getting this major grant for combat casualty, training called CSER, which is one of the most sophisticated combat casualty trauma simulators. But some of this isn't just a technical piece. It's how do you work together? How do you cross-train? One of the things the military taught us is if you're out in Afghanistan and something happens to your hand, you need to learn how to do the nursing, and maybe the nurse has to learn how to do the surgery. Well, we're starting to take some of those same principles because we learn that you start to understand what the other person does better. So this is a revolution in healthcare, and we're just thrilled to be leading it.
Yeah, that's what's neat, having it right here at USF, right here in Tampa.
Well, our thing is, why not USF, why not Tampa, why not now? Because healthcare is going to fundamentally change, and we don't want to be watching anybody else do it. There's no reason it shouldn't exist in this city with a great mayor like Mayor Buckhorn and all the great resources we have, and we want USF to be a leader.
Yeah.
So what do you think the economic impact will be? I know you've quantified it in terms of hotel rooms and potential spin-offs. I mean, talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I think the first thing is that you'll have 20 or 30,000 docs coming here.
That's a good thing.
And, I think that as the economy improves, this is a great city. And they'll not only get to go to restaurants, but they'll say, I'd like to have a second house here. And by the way, it's sort of affordable now. Or maybe I'd like to come to USF and be a doctor or a nurse. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is the companies. One of the things I haven't talked about yet, we want to create a one-stop shop for medical device manufacturers. They can come and develop a device, test it, and then train almost every doctor in the country once it's approved, all in one place. That will be the first place outside of Strasbourg where that's the case. So literally we think we'll bring in new companies. We think we'll have an advanced workforce because we'll be able to take some of those folks, as I said, that work 9 to 5 and say, I want to get into health, I want to advance myself, and now do it downtown. We think we'll have some new relationships with the military. All of this, we think, will not only help tourism and help restaurants and create a vibrancy down there, but it'll have other people say, hey, how can I get into this?
Dr. Classico, USF is emerging as a pioneer not only in the simulation and robotics sector, but there's a lot of other partnerships that you have started since your time here as dean. Tell us a little bit about that. I don't think people realize what a huge asset this is for the Tampa Bay community and what exciting things are taking place out here.
Well, I think we couldn't be more excited about being an entrepreneurial academic medical school. And that sounds sort of, yeah, that makes sense, but that's very unusual. Most medical schools are either academic or entrepreneurial, and we've been both. So we've been able to recruit people around the country. So I'll just give you a few of the things that we're doing now beyond camels. We're working with the villages, the large retirement community up north of here, and we got a relatively large grant to actually assess the health of that community. 85,000 people. We're going to try to bring them together electronically and look at how we can improve the health of that community. Now, villages came to us because we've been able to bring public health, nursing, pharmacy, and medicine all together. We're one of the first health science centers where if you go to any of our students, Mayor, and say, what college do you go to? They're going to say USF Health. They're not going to say pharmacy or medicine. Why? Because health is a team sport. In most places, they're in different buildings. They don't really work together. In our place, they take classes together. So they've learned from the beginning to be a team. So I think the villages is an incredibly exciting piece. We're working, as you know, with Tampa General in many, many different areas. We're working with the new partners for University Community Hospital, Adventist. Adventist has come down and is very interested in working with us.
Where are you from, by the way?
I'm a Philly boy. I'm a
Philly
Philadelphia
boy.
boy, South Philadelphia. Eagles fan. Sorry, that might,
It's
it
okay.
might keep
It's
me
not
off
football
the air.
season
But, your predecessor never got over that I was an Eagles fan, but I've become a Bucks and a Lightning fan.
Well, I'm a Penn State guy, so I get the fervor. I understand.
So, and my wife is from New York City. She worked for Vogue, so
You're
this
both
was a little
weird.
bit of a different.
West Virginia boy.
We used to beat you regularly.
Oh, I know.
So-
19 years in a row.
At least
So
that
to you,
much.
this was the big city, and to
Yeah,
me, and
that's
to
right.
Colleen and I, this was, oh my God, where have we come? But it's been great. I've been here 7 years, which in dean years is like dog years. That's like 35 years, because most deans, the average tenure for a dean is 2.5 years. And I think before me, no dean had lasted longer than 3 years. So we've been thrilled with being here, and I think we've helped move USF forward. It's really very exciting.
And you're right. You still do practice. I mean, I hear, you know. Obviously, I have a connection into the university.
She's actually my division chief, so she watches over me. But yeah, I still deliver babies at Tampa General. Something I'm very excited about. It's good both because that's what I did. I delivered over 2,500 babies in my career. I started out in private practice, but it's also good, frankly, because I really believe in change, and doctors don't always believe in change. And if they're going to follow somebody, it's good to see somebody that has greens, because with docs, it's either you're an us or them. And it doesn't matter what your degree is, it's whether or not they see you doing what you do.
Well, you know, the amazing concept that you talked about in the beginning, and people just don't think about that, and particularly at the warp speed that technology is moving today, the fact that doctors don't have any way of keeping up, of learning change unless they somehow experience it, which is not the best thing to happen to somebody in a relationship with a doctor at that time. Unlike, as you said earlier, pilots and a lot of other people that are dealing in IT situations, learning about what the future is going to hold.
So this is where my passion came from. I was one of the first doctors in the country to do what's called laparoscopic hysterectomies, where you can remove a uterus through a small incision. And there were about 30 of us that did it around the country, and the results were excellent. But then it gets on the Discovery Channel. This was back in the 80s. Then it gets on the Discovery Channel, and every doctor feels they have to do it because the patients are asking for it. So we went through this period of time where we had a lot of problems and a lot of mistakes because people were doing it that shouldn't have been. And I said, that should never happen. Once we have the people that come up with a new device, we have to have a way of making sure that everybody is competent before they do it. So that's what, and then I got a chance to see what they do at United and Delta, and those were our first partners.
Yeah, and they certainly use that simulation big time, even more so now.
And you know, and the other thing, if a pilot has one bumpy landing, this is what happens. They say, we love you very much, Pilot Buckhorn, but you know, we want you to spend the weekend in Denver on the simulator, because we don't know if you've got a problem. Or in medicine, let's say somebody has 3 or 4 bad cases in a row. There's nothing you can do. Well, now you'll be able to send them to Camels, and we'll be able to come back and say, no, he or she is within a mean and a standard deviation. We're already doing some of that. So if somebody has some complications, they'll be able to test themselves, and the hospital will be able to test them.
Yeah, you mentioned laparoscopic surgery. I know they do that on about everything now. Gallbladders,
Everything's
things
minimally
like that.
invasive. And the reason that's so great is the difference between doing something with a laparoscope and doing something open. Not only it's better for the patient, but it's 4 or 5 days of hospitalization, and you guys know what that costs.
Oh, yes.
So at USF, we've tried to, again, say what's going to happen 10 years from now. There's something in the St. Petersburg Times. We're the first medical school in the country, starting this year, that's accepting medical students based on emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Explain that. Is
So-
that just good bedside manner or what?
Well, think about it this way. We still accept doctors based on their science GPA, you know, how well they know physics, their MedCats, which are a multiple choice test, and whether or not they can memorize organic chemistry formulas. And somehow we're amazed that doctors...
We'd be out of there.
Yeah, well,
That's gone a long time ago.
But somehow we're amazed that doctors are more empathetic, communicative, or creative. I just wrote an article called From Marcus Welby to House, How Did We Get Here? How do we get from people viewing us as Marcus Welby, where we could do anything, to House, where, well, partly is because we kept concentrating on the science. So we have the first medical school where literally we're using the aviation industry again, because that's how they choose pilots, and Wharton to measure the emotional intelligence of our applicants. Are they going to be good team players? Are they going to be able to communicate with patients? Are they going to be able to understand things that are ambiguous? Those are all very important.
What do you see as the next breakthrough, the next step after what's happening now in medicine? And I mean, you talked about laparoscopic surgery way back when, and what's being done today, and then the simulation coming up, and the use of IT to communicate with patients at home and things like that. What do you see as the next big breakthrough?
The biggest breakthrough, in the thing that's going to look 10 years from now and say, wow, this has been like the iPod for Apple, is going to be changing the way we look at patients as a group of patients to individuals. And we're going to have hopefully, one of the top centers in the country. This is what it means. Right now, if you're on a cholesterol-lowering drug, Lipitor, a doctor looked at you and said, I think you ought to be on 10 milligrams of Lipitor, and you ought to be on 20, based on people that look like you. Now we can get your exact genome and say you ought to be on 12 and a half. or maybe Lipitor is not going to work for you at all. So we brought one of the top cardiologists in the country, Les Miller from Georgetown, who did the studies that said 35% of people on cardiac drugs are on the right drug.
35% and
65% are on the right
65%
drug.
are on the wrong drug.
Right, because they're literally given that drug based on what we think will work. So he did a study, for example, the drug for congestive heart failure. It turns out that many African American individuals just don't get better on it. And we used to think maybe they're not taking it. No, it's just that in that genetic type, there was actually not any efficacy. So we're going to have one of the first centers in the country, and we're working with Sarasota Memorial and others on how we can literally start to look at the molecular basis for treatment. And then the other thing that's happening is adult stem cells. Those are the good ones. So we're actually bringing in a researcher who's actually created a heart from a rat's own stem cell. So imagine this, when you have a heart attack and you lose heart tissue, you never get it back. When you have a stroke, if within 2 hours, if you inject certain stem cells, that brain or that heart will actually regenerate. So we're doing actual research and clinical trials on that now. And literally, we will be one of the centers in the country. We're going to go to the state for some money. We're going to go for philanthropy. But we have the people. We have Les Miller, and we're recruiting somebody from outside. And then the last thing that I think is really important is getting docs and nurses and entities to work together. The Bird Alzheimer's Center is a huge success because we have people from 10 different colleges all thinking about Alzheimer's. We take care of patients, we educate. We need to do the same kind of thing with the hospitals in this area. Imagine if we took all the hospitals in this area, Baycare and Tampa General and USF Health and Moffitt, and really created something special. We don't all have to be the same corporate entity. So to me, that's going to be the next big wave, that we're going to create a Tampa Bay-wide health community that people from all over the country say, wow, that's where they did it right. We still have some work to do.
Dr. Classico, we sadly are out of time for this segment. You can understand now why we asked him to be our second guest on this show. What he's doing represents the future of what this community looks like. And so when you look at USF and you look at the medical school, you see opportunity, you see hope, you see aspirations, you see those kinds of value-added jobs that will allow us to create real wealth. Jack, this is one of the most exciting things that I've ever been a part of when I see his vision and I see what the potential is for this community.
It is stunning.
We are going to go to a video right now. The next person you're going to see when we come back is Dr. Deb Sutherland. She is the CEO of Camels. And before we do that, we're going to watch a short video on the simulation and robotics that's taking place down there. Don't go away. Come back with us shortly. And Dr. Classico, thanks for all you do. And we're excited to have you here.
And thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jack. I really appreciate it.
The Caesar simulator is an example of the types of simulations that we'll be able to conduct at Camels. This simulator is being piloted around the country with groups of combat medics from across the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Caesar is a full-body mannequin, same weight as an adult human, which is designed to simulate several critical injuries on the battlefield. The first is exsanguinating hemorrhage, and that's hemorrhage from traumatic amputations or mangled extremities, extremities that when hit with an explosive are stripped of muscle and fragments of bone. The second thing that it demonstrates nicely is what's called tension pneumothorax. And a tension pneumothorax is air in the chest cavity outside of the lung that builds up pressure and restricts the ability of blood to get back to the heart. And if blood can't get back to the heart, blood can't be pumped out of the heart, needless to say, you lose blood pressure. This simulator replicates both of these scenarios to a very high degree. This is a new technology, and the principal elements that differentiate it from anything else going on now are, one, it's truly life size and life weight. So that combat medics actually have something that simulates an injured soldier in the battlefield, somebody they have to move. There's a physical nature to care that's important to simulate, and so this Caesar simulator does that. 2, it has immediate feedback. And what I mean by that is that when a combat medic applies a tourniquet to stop the bleeding on an extremity that's had a traumatic amputation, there are pressure sensors within the thigh that feed back to the tablet that manages the particular scenario, and as a result, the simulator regains consciousness. The simulator, because the bleeding has been stopped appropriately, now wakes up. Same thing can be said for decompression of the chest successfully with a needle. That is the appropriate therapy, needle decompression for tension pneumothorax. When that happens, the simulator wakes up and says, I can breathe more easily now. That is atypical. Most of the time when interventions are made on a simulator, somebody managing the scenario, a monitor, a facilitator, has to push a button, and then the simulator says something, or then the bleeding stops. This center, the Center for Advanced Medical Learning and Simulation, is about transforming how we deliver health care. How we deliver health care in hospitals, in clinics, on the battlefield. We believe that we can transform health care by transforming how we educate and train those who provide health care. We can actually increase the fidelity of the types of training simulations that occur. We can measure those outcomes. We can define competence, proficiency, and expert performance. That has never been done.
One of the key things that most residents learn to do, or have to do while they're in the residency, is putting in central lines. What a central line is a very large IV that we put into one of the main veins that lead to the heart. This allows us to give medications that need to go throughout the body, or sometimes if we have to feed people through their veins, we have to do that through these large IVs. This is a procedure that's done commonly, but it's also has risks with it, some of which can be pretty severe. As you can imagine, having a vein that goes to the heart is near the lungs. What we've looked at is trying to develop a training program to allow residents to practice doing this on a model as opposed to learning to do it on humans. In the past, it's been that you watch a couple, one of the upper level residents or your head surgeon or one of the attending physicians tells you what they're doing, how they're going to do it, and then they watch you do it through a couple before they let you go on your own. One of the problems with this is you really don't know what it feels like to do that until you do the first stick, as we would say. And nobody really wants to be the patient that's the first stick, obviously. So what we've done is we've developed a training program here to teach residents the different steps of the procedure. And then we have a new model here with the Sindaver model, which is more lifelike or realistic. One of the words we use is fidelity, and it's what we call a high fidelity model.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Hour. That was a great video. You can see all of the exciting things that are going to be taking place out here. Joining us now is the woman that's going to make it all happen, Jack. She is Dr. Deb Sutherland. She is the CEO of Camels. She is the woman that is supervising the construction and ultimately will supervise the operation of this wonderful facility. Welcome to the Mayor's Hour.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
We talked earlier about in generalities what this is all about, because it's pretty difficult for the layperson like myself to grasp. But this is going to be, as we talked about earlier, tremendous for Tampa, for the people of Tampa, for the economy of Tampa, for the business of Tampa, and what it generates downtown, isn't it?
It absolutely is. When we think of Camels, we think of three major components. Camels will provide an urban campus for the University of South Florida, and that's huge for us to be able to move some of our academic programs to a downtown environment. We will also be able to train all healthcare professionals from physicians, nurses, pharmacists, the military in advanced and complex procedures and team training. And it will allow us to establish a national prominence where we will have major interest and from specialty societies, other academic institutions, all of them coming to Tampa for advanced training.
What kind of numbers do you see there? I mean, are we talking hundreds of people a year, thousands of people a year, or?
We're talking thousands of people a year. We anticipate the throughput for camels will be first year around 30,000 people.
Woo, you're gonna love that.
And it will go up from there. That's 30,000 people using the airport, using the restaurants, booking room nights. So we are very excited about the anticipated business that camels will bring to the downtown area.
Well, that's exciting. We've put up on the screen here a picture of Jack's brainwaves. And that's after a few beers.
You've been waiting to do
I just looked over there and I said, I cannot resist this.
No, after a few beers,
Yeah.
definitely.
So tell us how simulation and robotics is playing into today's medicine and today's training of a doctor.
So here are basically three ways that we use simulation. Simulation has become a very important component in assessing the competence of an individual professional. So we can bring a physician, a nurse, an OR tech in, and we can use simulation to assess their level of skill. So we can then use that to develop an individual training program to enhance performance. We can also use simulation to evaluate outcomes. So we have Jack come in and we're not sure about his professional skill sets, maybe his cognitive ability based on this brainwave. So we need
It's all
to
those years getting up early in
evaluate.
the morning and hanging out with Ted Webb.
I think that did.
So we need to evaluate Jack's cognitive ability, his technical skills, his interpersonal skills.
Oh, well,
So
that's easy.
All of that. So we can set up a simulation using high-fidelity simulations or team scenarios to assess, train, or evaluate his performance. This will be huge in the future as we use simulation to practice or rehearse complex procedures so that physicians will be better able to predict outcomes.
Now that'll be great. And just what Dr. Classico was telling us too about the fact that you haven't had this in the past, that unlike airline pilots, when there's a new kind of aircraft or something like that, or as advancements in technology take place, these guys train, they learn everything that's new. It doesn't happen with physicians, or it hasn't happened in the past, and this will be the new future, I guess.
Correct, and as Dr. Classico indicated, in the past, the way that we have trained healthcare professionals, it's very much been a see one, do one, teach one environment. This really is a game changer. It changes how we teach all healthcare professionals as we move forward. When we talk about simulation, it's not just the aviation model. We can use standardized patients, we can use low-fidelity simulators, we can use task trainers, but the key here is that we will be able to set metrics to evaluate performance. So it's no longer going with the mayor and seeing how the mayor does something and then replicating that. It's having standardized measurements where we can really evaluate performance. We can then evaluate interpersonal types of skills and leadership skills in a team environment. You know, as we focus more on technology, it becomes critical that we don't forget the communication skills and the leadership skills.
The bedside manner.
Correct. And that's what Dr. Classico referred to in the previous discussion also when he was talking about emotional intelligence. That becomes even more critical as we deal with simulation, using iPods or iCasts, web-based learning. All of those tend to focus on technology, so we can't forget the other components that are equally important in a healthcare environment.
Dr. Sutherland, I mean, not only is this going to be great training for MDs and PhDs and MPAs, talk to us also about the number of jobs that will be created or the types of jobs that will be created to support the doctors.
So when we talk about camels, the basic components of camels involve simulation, the BioSkills Lab, which is an interventional lab that will have a trauma OR, a hybrid cath lab, a CAT scan, CT, 64-slice CT scan. We will have a research and innovation lab. So research and innovation attracts scientists. So we're talking about engineers, we're talking about computer scientists, we're talking about physicians. So we're talking about very senior level academicians and industry scientists who will be working at CAMLS. In addition to the interest that we have from the military for advanced training, for research. So we will have a whole cadre of support services that develop around CAMLS for the research and innovation component.
That's something that Dr. Classico, I think, touched on was the, you know, we got MacDill Air Force Base here, not to mention the VA hospitals and all the other things here that can take advantage of what you guys are doing there.
Exactly, exactly.
But I would imagine also, if you look at some of our community colleges that are training our technicians who may not have a 4-year degree, I would surmise that for every doctor, there would be an additional need for additional technology assistants and technicians to run all of the various equipment.
Exactly. And what happens in today's specialized health care, an OR tech is not an OR tech is not an OR tech. We need training in specialized areas. So CAMLS provides an opportunity for us to bring OR techs and cardiac cath techs and other types of support personnel to CAMLS for additional training in advanced procedures.
Now, from the standpoint of what's actually moving down there from here, or what's going to be new down there, how much of the health center is actually going to be moving down there, or how much is going to be new that you don't have at the health center now there? If you can understand what I'm talking about, the growth.
That's a great question. So we have 3 simulation centers that will be moving to CAMLS. One is our robotics center. That's where we train on the Da Vinci robot. That's moving to CAMLS. It's presently on campus. We have a simulation center at Tampa General that will be moving to, that's a surgical simulation center that will be moving to CAMLS. And we have a Med-Ped simulation center that's located presently on Davis Island in 17 Davis that is for team training in medicine and pediatrics. They will also be moving to CAMLS. So those are existing centers that we intentionally opened as a proof of concept for CAMLS.
Yeah.
So that we would have 2 years experience under our belt with the types of programs and training that's needed. So when we move, we're ready to go.
That's exciting.
Oh, it is.
Exciting for downtown.
And the rest, about how much, if you can come up with like percentage-wise, is going to be new? I mean, in addition to what we have already on Davis Islands and at TGH and here.
So 60% will be new. The
Wow.
hybrid cath lab, we will have the only hybrid cath lab in the country. A hybrid cath lab is a combination of an interventional lab and an OR suite. And that's how we're training physicians and staff these days, so that if you come in for a procedure, that you could come in and have a cardiac cath in the same room that you then might have an OR procedure in. You don't need to go move to another OR, you don't need to be discharged and come back. You can just move from cardiac cath, an interventional procedure, into minimally invasive surgical procedure. So we will have the only hybrid cath lab for training purposes in the country when we open. This is huge for us with all of the latest innovations in structural heart disease, stenting, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So this is a huge asset for us as far as residency training and recredentialing of physicians.
What's the timeline now for moving in down there, for opening up down there? Do you have a pretty good handle on that at this point?
We do, and I suggest you ask Mr. House that question also, but I believe what he will say is that we are on target with the construction, that we will be moving in January, and we will take occupancy the very first part of February. We have our first major activity scheduled for February 8th.
Ooh,
So we are on target as we speak.
Well, we're not going to let the permitting process get in your way. That much I can promise you.
Well, we
Talking to the
appreciate
right guy
that. And Mr. Mayor, I must say that the City of Tampa has been extremely supportive of this project. We have been very fortunate that the city has worked very well with Mr. House and Beck. Beck is our design build team, and we have been very fortunate for the support that we have had from the city on a fast track project, because it's a very complex project, as you'll hear with the next discussion, and without the support of the city to deal with permitting and transportation and all of that, this project would never have been a reality in this short period of time.
Well, Deb, we have about a minute and a half to go. And one of the things that's most exciting, Jack, is the opportunity to create a cluster in our downtown environment
Yes.
that will attract other like-minded corporations to relocate here. We know that this has worldwide implications. I understand that you and Dr. Classico are going to Israel in November to talk to some medical manufacturers. Tell us a little bit about what Camels can do on the international stage to help us create a larger cluster here.
On the international stage, we are focusing on biomedical technology. When we talk about research and innovation, we're talking about developing the latest and the greatest in modeling and medical simulation. We're talking about how does that translate to patient care. We're talking about medical device commercialization. How can we work with industry to develop the next great product that will really enhance patient safety and reduce medical errors? And to do that, we need partners. So we anticipate collaborating with a handful of partners worldwide in developing these new innovations.
Well, that's very exciting.
It is.
Certainly, Jack has donated his brain.
Well, I was going to
And-
say, can I get one of these snapshots to take home?
Joy would never believe that there's any activity up there.
No, she's known that for years.
Well, Dr. Sutherland, thank you for joining us. You and Dr. Classico are a great team together. We're happy that you took the time to be with us to talk about this exciting project. We're happy to be your partner in downtown Tampa. We have the person that actually is going to build the building coming up next, Mark House, who runs Beck's operation here. So from all of us, thank you, Jack.
Yep, we'll see you downtown.
Thank you.
We'll
It's
see you
been a
downtown at
pleasure.
the ribbon cutting, and we'll see you right back in a moment.
We will have several of these lap mentor machines, and what it does is it lets us learn and practice laparoscopic procedures in a virtual reality environment. So what it offers is some realistic anatomy to do surgical procedures, everything from removing gallbladders to colon surgery to gynecologic surgery, as well as practicing specific hand-eye coordination tasks and doing them repeatedly and actually being able to measure performance. It shows bleeding, it shows complications, it shows very, very realistic anatomy. The instruments, even though they're virtual, look realistic. There's actually what we call haptic feedback, where if your instrument touches something you don't want it to touch, you'll feel that. And that's also simulated. There are several different scenarios you can choose, different patients, if you will, and depending on what you do in that patient, the simulator will actually tell you you've had a complication, you've cut something you shouldn't have cut, your patient is bleeding, things like that. We generally use it with everyone from medical students to residents to practicing physicians. What we typically do is rotate them among this simulator, one or two other simulators, and then some very simple trainer boxes that actually have exercises they can do with instruments. The nice thing about the simulator compared to the trainer boxes is that it's reproducible and measurable, so you can actually measure performance on here. This is incredibly state-of-the-art technology, and it's one of the things that's helping us catch up with other industries. We're often compared to the airline industry, and how if you're a pilot of a 747, every 6 months you have to come in and prove your competence in the simulator. And in addition to proving your competence, they throw complications at you. They'll have a wing fall off on the simulator and see how you recover and train you how to recover from that. That's where we're just starting to go in healthcare, and specifically in the surgical specialties. I just can't describe how great it's going to be when we walk in the door at Camels. It's just an amazing concept. It's going to be a one-of-the-kind facility in the country and even in the world, and it's really going to define the Tampa Bay area in healthcare.
This is a Simman, and this is a unique model that helps learners with the physiology and the anatomical changes that happen in a sick patient. It'll talk to you, so we can program verbal responses so that you come and talk to the patient. You can say, you know, Sally, how are you feeling? And he'll talk to you. He'll tell you, I don't feel good. My leg hurts or my belly hurts. As it gets worse, they'll start to gargle maybe, and they can't speak to you at all. Up here near the mouth, if I need to put a breathing tube in, it will allow me to do that completely. Or we have ways of changing the anatomy of the mouth so that you can't intubate. You can't put the tube in the mouth. And the learner would have to understand that that's an emergency situation and I need to do another maneuver to get air into the lungs. In the chest cavity, I can listen for breath sounds easily on either side, and if there's a problem or a collapse of a lung, I can actually do a therapy and re-expand that lung. Down in the arms and the legs, there's areas where I can actually feel a pulse, so that I can have, in this scenario, someone lose a pulse in the leg and have the learner tell me, well, what would happen if they lost a pulse? What does that mean? Well, how is that incorporated into the rest of the physiology? And then over here, the benefit is, in real time, if I don't put the breathing tube fast enough, if I don't put the chest tube in to help the collapsed lung, the patient's actual physiology will change and maintain a crisis situation. But likewise, when they do it in real time, it will improve, and they can see that their actions improve the patient's care. What this model does, and what the new learning styles are, is to take the learner before they see the patient and come back and say, well, these are the common scenarios that can go wrong. This is what you would look for in the physiologic changes, and these are some of the tools you have to stop that. And then we program it into the computer, and the mannequin, the Simman, will actually do those things. And so the learner, after having some didactic learning and reading from the book and maybe some classroom time, will come in here and actually practice, not on the patient on the floor, but actually here in lifelike conditions, so they can get, one, their sense of team, so they know who to call and how to do things. Two, their own sense of abilities, so they have confidence as they go forward to actually take care of patients. And also get some feedback and say, well, what did you think about that? Did you actually understand what we're trying to tell you? Why is this important to look at the patient? And have their own feedback so they can actually become adult learners, which is continuously learning and continuously growing in their practice. I love watching that early learner get that little light bulb suddenly go off and go, wait a minute, I know what to do now. And you can see them over time, they get better, they get faster. What Camels does now is something that other centers have tried to do in individual little silos. We have a Simman, or we have this kind of mannequin for this procedure. This, along with everything else in Camels together, is bringing together the nurses, the doctors, the pharmacists, in real time to say, well, this is your patient, this is how we'll do it. And we envision a whole disciplines and professional groups coming together and doing scenarios, but also their own individual training, and get a sense of what it's really like happening in a hospital. And that's something unique that Camels has that I don't think we have anywhere else.
I love working with my classmates, and it's awesome to see them in this scenario and be like, wow, we all actually get it. We learned this all together, and we get to go through it together. Obviously, it's a mannequin, but at the same time, it does feel very real. I was feeling my heart racing a little bit, and then I'm over here trying to get my team involved, and I could tell that we're all a little nervous because this is new to us too, and it's very real in that sense. Yeah, we're in a simulation center, but it gets your heart pumping.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Hour. Another great simulator video. It's exciting to see the technology that's taking place in our community. And with us today, Jack, is the guy that's going to actually build the building. He is Mark House. He is the managing director of the Beck Group, a very, very prominent construction company here in the Tampa area, who's done a lot of the signature buildings around town. He's a great builder. He comes from a great family. You and I were just laughing.
A signature family in
Signature
the Tampa Bay
family.
area.
Yep. His mom and dad, for many of you who know Mark and Sue, or Joe and Sue House, have served this community for 25 years, Mark?
Absolutely.
And we've been lucky to have him. So Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very excited about being here.
This is the easiest grilling that you'll ever get.
I like that. I like that.
I reckon so. But he's the guy in charge of actually getting the building up and making it happen. Tell us a little bit about the building itself, the structure, the physical plan.
Well, we're actually responsible for designing the building, doing all the architecture, engineering, and construction. So it's a design-build project. It's going to be a 90,000 square foot building, 3 stories tall in actuality of floors, but it'll look like a building that's probably 6 or 7 stories tall. The floor-to-floor height from just the ground floor to the bottom of the second floor is over 20 feet to accommodate some of the surgical skill labs and some of the other things that are there. And then there'll be a penthouse on the top that'll make it even look taller, that'll house all the air handling units, the air conditioning systems. So it'll be a pretty striking building. It'll be very nice.
Specifically for people who don't get downtown a lot, tell us where it is, which blocks.
It's located just south of the Fort Brooke Garage. It was an old parking lot that was owned by the city, and the city really worked hard with USF and got them to do that. But it's bounded by Franklin Street on the west and Florida on the east, and then Broarine is just to the south. So it's about a half an acre lot that's been there for, probably since the Fort Brooke Garage was built.
I got to believe that the technology of this type, that the construction design must be a challenge. I mean, this is not your standard office building.
This is not. There's so many different functions. There's nothing like it. Typically, you work in a hospital and it's hospital rooms and some surgery areas. There is about 12 to 15 different functions that are all happening in this hospital, from the simulation laboratories, the research laboratories, the surgical skills area, administration. And then I know that some of the things that USF wants to propose, there's classroom and academic facilities in there. There's a 200-seat auditorium in there and a dining facility.
This is considered one of a kind, and you tend to think, well, if you're going to build a building like this, they're pretty much similar everywhere. But I've been told this is kind of a one-of-a-kind building, this Camel project.
To our knowledge, there's nothing like it in the world, and because of all the different functions that are there, that a doctor can come from Cincinnati and get training, and he can go through robotics surgery training, he can go through a surgical skills lab, he can go up and sit in an auditorium where he has a teleconference with somebody with the Mayo Clinic and have that kind of interaction and training, be fed there, go upstairs and look at the research and innovation laboratory where they're working on heart stents, all under one roof. So it's pretty interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, he's talked about this before, and of course this is I guess it's the N word now when you talk about growth and economic growth, particularly for communities, but clusters. That everybody is looking to build a cluster concept because that means a lot of growth, not just one company or something like that. Certainly, this environment there is conducive to that kind of growth, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's not just one thing. You're looking at a myriad of different technologies, medicine, engineering, all put together. And when you put that kind of people and smart intelligence all together in a very dense environment, it generates new ideas. I mean, if you look at what the Renaissance back in the Middle Ages, that was when people moved from an agrarian society downtown and started having cities, and that's when tremendous innovation happened. And that's the kind of thing, even though that was on a grand scale, that's the kind of thing that's going to happen with our city, a renaissance.
Mark, tell me what the outside features are going to look like. What can people expect when they drive down Florida Avenue? How will it interact with the street level landscaping in the trolley?
There's some really cool, there's going to be some really cool screens on the outside, perforated metal screens with some lighting that go on. So there's going to be this ambient type experience where we can light the building in different colors, not unlike the Modern Art Museum downtown.
Really?
Similar type facade on the outside. There'll be a lot of glass, but there'll also be a glass atrium on the Franklin Street side that's open to the public. And so it'll be a 2-story atrium, glass on one side, and a beautiful, almost an arcade with artwork and some other medical type artwork. That's one of the things we're talking about having in a Starbucks kind of cafe, except it's going to be a local cafe there that will serve local coffee.
Now you're talking about open to the public, though. You mean
absolutely.
People just stop by.
Part of the requirement for the Franklin Street overlay is to have some public space, and there'll probably be about 8,000 square feet of public space. That right between going north and south between the Fort Brooke Garage and then come swing through there on the way to the convention center.
And of course you got the trolleys right out there.
And the trolleys are right there as well, right there. It'll be beautiful on the by both sides, but on the Franklin side, there'll be a nice large plaza between the building and the trolleys that the city has really worked with us very well on. Be some nice trees between the trolleys and the building itself.
What do you think in the area around Camels? Is there anything that the city needs to do to help facilitate the generation of those clusters or attract other medical suppliers?
I think it's just exposing as many people as possible. The city right now is doing a very good job at streamlining the permit process, working with the zoning, being compatible. Downtown's an old downtown. The rules downtown that were 2 or 3 years ago don't necessarily apply for the future. The world has changed significantly, and the city is adapting and changing. There's property proximate that could be some new medical office or research type facilities. There's existing space downtown that could be repurposed. And I think all those things are primed to happen, really primed to happen.
Well, that's what I was thinking right away. I mean, it would be a great place to put a medical art building or something like that.
Well, the other thing is
nearby.
retail. Where do these people eat lunch? Where do these people eat dinner? There's gathering places. You got the Performing Arts Center that's up and around the corner, the Convention Center, and you got the St. Pete Times Forum. How does that all connect and work together? When you look at the conventions that Dr. Sutherland's going to bring in, medical type conventions with the AMA, to look at Camels, they're going to use the convention. They're going to use the St. Pete Times Forum.
Oh, it's going to really be great for
it's,
Embassy Suites and
unbelievable
Waterside
impact.
and
Right.
Hyatt and all these others.
What
downtown.
folks don't necessarily always realize is when she talked about 30,000 folks coming to visit, that's 30,000 room nights.
Yes.
In local hotels, we'll be
Right.
eating in local restaurants and buying at local stores, and
Right.
and hopefully riding a trolley
Right.
that I think
Oh,
I'm
the
about to
City?
own. So you and I need to ride the trolley about
think we're gonna
1,000
have to.
more times.
I love
I'll
it.
pay
I
for
love
it.
it. I'm
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah, but it doesn't pay for itself, Jack.
Well, you get tourists to go on and go to Ybor City and to
Yes,
go to the aquarium. If you've been there once, if you live downtown, or if you've been there once, maybe once every 6 months that you'll do as a novelty. But now you have 30,000 more potential customers to do those things. So I think it's a great asset.
Well, Mark, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your service to the city. For those
Sure.
of you who don't know, he's also a West Point grad and a former Army Ranger. And so thank you for your service to the
Thank you very
country
much.
as well. So we'll be right back, and Jack and I will wrap it up.
My name is Jenny Allen, and I'm a mother, a writer, and a performer. I also survived uterine and ovarian cancers. I even wrote a play about that.
Maybe you are just cancer-ish, and it'll pass.
Before cancer, I took my health entirely for granted, like air. But my symptoms, pain in my abdomen, and periods that were heavier and longer than usual for me, related to menopause, I thought. But no, I had cancer. And treatment. If you have symptoms that last 2 weeks or longer, be brave. Go to the doctor. Ask questions. The odds are you don't have cancer. But find out for sure.
Ovarian and uterine cancers are gynecologic cancers. Signs and symptoms are not the same for everyone.
Now I'm feeling healthy and happy and hopeful. I am so lucky. I got sick, and then I got better.
Welcome back to the Mayor's Hour. We just had a great guest in Mark House. We're looking forward to seeing that coming out of the ground, Jack.
Oh boy, that's going to be exciting for down there. And as pointed out, there's a lot of room, and it's going to foster other building down there, and particularly in the medical arts and things like that. And Lord knows what it could bring from the outside in the way of the so-called cluster. That's a great thing.
Yeah, it really is. And I think it's turning the corner for downtown Tampa. We haven't had a major project in downtown, certainly of this significance, in a long time.
Well,
So it's so good to see those cranes up there every time I drive
Ain't
down
that the
Florida
truth?
Avenue.
Well, it ain't because you ain't been trying. I've been doing a little traveling, trying to generate a little business around the globe, right?
Yeah, well, I have. I was in New York the last 2 days talking to some of our rating agencies, telling them the Tampa story, making sure they're comfortable with the new administration and, where we are financially, and because that affects our ability to borrow money.
Yeah.
It also largely sends out a message to those investors around the country as to whether or not we're stable or not. And so it was a whirlwind trip. Every time I go to New York, my life flashes in front of me every time I get into a cab. I mean, it is a scary thing to get into a New York cab and drive those streets.
You'd just be glad you aren't mayor of that place, because you just went through a budget now. And you're talking about things now that most people don't worry about. They think about the mayor, you're going to go do a ribbon cutting, going to do this and that, but the budget is the nuts and bolts of mayoring, isn't it?
It is. When I took office on April 1st, not because of anybody's fault, there was a $34.5 million deficit.
Yeah.
And so literally every day for the last 100 days, we have spent a good portion of our day trying to get that number down, trying to scrub city government and look in under every carpet, every chair, to see what we could do to find efficiencies, to reduce the size of city government. Because unlike the federal government, I don't print money.
Yeah.
I don't get the opportunity
And
to
you've
extend
got to
debt.
balance the budget.
I've got to balance that budget. And next week I will submit a budget to City Council that is balanced. I'm so thankful that I followed Pam Iorio, because she left a very, very healthy, what's called fund balance, which is the escrow account.
Yeah.
So we were able to get that $34.5 million down to something less than $6 million that we will have to tap that escrow account for, while at the same time reducing the size of government, not laying off folks, because in this economy, you lay someone off, they're going to have a hard time getting another job.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't be the mayor that creates jobs when at the same time I'm laying folks off. And so we were very diligent about that and try to take that into consideration. But I think in the long run, the hard work paid off. And we're ready for another year, and we're excited about what the next year is going to bring.
Yeah, it's good to see that happen. And the one thing is, of course, depending on what happens at the federal level and everything else, but the one thing is there are indications that the nation is about to pull out of it. And of course, we have been hit harder because of the housing market, but there are a lot of indicators that lead us to believe that we have pretty much bottomed out, and we're going to start some movement back, and that you're going to be able to see some good times here down the road too.
You know, I think so, Jack. I mean, we study it and monitor it every day, and we're seeing an uptick in permits, applications. We're seeing
that's great.
a slowing of the decline of property values. I mean, I had anticipated an 8% decline. I got a -3, and I was ecstatic about it.
Wow.
So every time that ticks a little bit further up, that means more potential revenue for the city. But equally as important is Florida has been like a crack addict for growth.
Yes.
For
That's
growth's
true.
sake.
Yeah.
These jobs that we talked about today are the jobs of the future. Those are the jobs that add real value to the equation, where you're allowed to create real wealth. It's not just growth for the sake of growing, building one subdivision after the other for people who don't exist yet, and for banks giving folks to people who can't afford it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm excited about what USF brings to the table, but more importantly, I'm excited about changing Tampa's economic DNA. And I think once we start transitioning from that old economy to a new economy, we will be much more stable and much more secure over the long term than we have been.
Yeah, because there hadn't been a real economic downturn here in places like this. These things go on, and those things are so important, and it's exciting. I like the phrase you used, a new economic DNA for Tampa. That sounds like a slogan if I ever heard one.
Well, we're working on it. But
That's great.
Thank you for joining us. As always, it's good to see my friend Jack Harris. He's a glutton for punishment by coming out here and doing this with me every month, but hopefully you're learning a little bit more about your city, and we appreciate you watching. So until the next Mayor's Hour, from Jack and I, be safe, stop running red lights, and we'll see you next month.